Hey guys, welcome back to episode 5 of Fighting Brain Rot, reclaiming critical thinking from the bottom of your feet to stop existing and start living. I am so glad you're here with me today, and I'm really proud of how far this podcast came by now. Today, we are diving headfirst into a topic that has been floating all over the internet and in online personality quizzes for years now. It is something that sounds incredibly smart and clinical, but it is actually a myth, and I'm talking about the left brain versus right brain dominance concept. Commonly, people say that if you are organized, analytical, logical, and amazing at math, then you are a left brained. But if you are creative, artistic, highly emotional, intuitive, and you daydream a lot, then without a doubt, you are a right brained. And as a society, we love this kind of labels, don't we? It makes us feel like we belong somewhere. As humans, we are obsessed with categorization. We love anything that acts like a psychological sorting hat that explains exactly who we are. It makes us feel understood. It gives us a sense of community and a sense of belonging. But today, we are going to use our critical lens to completely tear this concept apart. We're going to trace a real history behind it, break down the actual neurobiology of our minds, and uncover the psychological traps of why we fall for it. First, we all know the only way to understand the present is to analyze exactly where the ideas came from. So, taking a close look at history, the whole left versus right brain dominance concept didn't happen by accident. It started with real science that was completely twisted by the media machine. Let's travel back to the 1960s. Imagine a laboratory where a neurobiologist named Roger Sperry, along with his brilliant colleagues like Michael Gazzaniga, began conducting a research on a very specific group of individuals, split brain patients. These were human beings who suffered from severe, life-threatening epilepsy, and to stop the debilitating seizures from tearing through their brains, surgeons performed a radical operation. They severed the corpus callosum. And for those who don't know, the corpus callosum actually is think of your brain as a hyper-advanced dual-tower supercomputer. You have the left hemisphere and then the right hemisphere, and the corpus callosum is the thing that allows their communication. So it is basically a super highway made up over of over 200 million nerve fibers sending billions of signals back and forth every single second. And when surgeons cut this bridge to save these patients from seizures, the left and right hemispheres could no longer connect to each other. They were isolated. And Roger Sperry conducted a fascinating experiment on his patients. For example, he found that if you showed an image of an object, imagine an apple, only to a patient's right visual field, the signal went to the left hemisphere because the left hemisphere houses the primary speech centers, and the patient could easily say, "That's an apple." But if the image was shown only to the left visual field, the signal went to the right hemisphere because the bridge was cut, the right hemisphere couldn't send the data to the speech center, the patient would claim they saw nothing. Yet, if you ask their left hand, which is controlled by the right hemisphere, to reach under a curtain and pick out the object, the hand would perfectly pick up the apple. The right brain knew the apple was there, it just couldn't speak. Sperry discovered that the left hemisphere was generally superior at processing language, syntax, and sequential step-by-step logic, while the right hemisphere was superior at visual spatial processing, facial recognition, and recognizing the rhythm and inflections of sound. Sperry actually won a Nobel Prize for this in 1981, and personally, he totally deserved it. Honestly, he changed neuroscience forever. But then the media and the mainstream press took a highly specific medical observation about individuals who literally had their brains surgically cut in half, and they fed that to the uneducated masses. In the 70s and 80s, articles started popping up everywhere with headlines like, "Are you a left brain manager or a right brain artist?" Management seminaries began charging thousands of dollars to teach corporate executives how to activate their left brain logic. Educational theories emerged claiming that schools were oppressing right-brained creative children by forcing them to do math. Suddenly, the biological reality about an extreme medical condition became a universal psychological sorting hat for perfectly healthy individuals. We took a beautiful, complex biological truth and flattened it into a shallow consumer trend. But now, let's take a look at the reality. For decades, the pop psychology world maintained that people are structurally dominant on one side. But in 2013, neuroscientists at the University of Utah decided to put this entirely to test using modern state-of-the-art technology. They conducted a massive study. They analyzed the function magnetic resonance imaging scans of more than 1,000 human beings over a 2-year period. They didn't just look at the surface. They analyzed thousands of specific microscopic brain regions to see if certain individuals had stronger neural networks on one side versus the other. And guess what they found? Yeah, zero evidence that individuals have a dominant side of the brain. Let me repeat. Absolute zero evidence. The lead author of the study, Dr. Jeff Anderson, explicitly stated that it is absolutely true that some brain functions occur on one side or the other, a concept scientists call lateralization, but individuals do not have a stronger left-sided or right-sided network. You don't have a left brain personality or a right brain personality. You just have a brain, a whole beautiful, fully connected brain that functions as an integrated system. Let's take an example. Learning and speaking a language. The internet tells you that grammar, vocabulary, and sentence structures are purely left-brained logical activities, but structurally, fluency is completely impossible without both sides working in perfect harmony. When you engage a conversation, your left hemisphere handles the heavy lifting of mechanics. It dictates the syntax, structures your verbs, and retrieves the literal dictionary definition of words. But at the exact same millisecond, your right hemisphere is processing the emotional tone, the inflection, the sarcasm, the cultural metaphors, and the musical rhythm of the conversation. If you only used your left brain, you would sound like a literal robot, completely unable to understand a joke, a poetic phrase, or an ironic statement. Let's take a look at another one, creative expression, like painting, sketching, or designing. The pop psychology narrative tells you that the art is an unstructured, chaotic explosion of the intuitive right brain. Yeah, very dramatic. But that is anatomically absurd. To create a visual piece of art, your left hemisphere is heavily engaged to calculate spatial proportions, perspective, structural lines, vanishing points, and the sequential step-by-step logic of mixing chemical pigments to get the right shade, for example. Even mathematics, the ultimate left brain activity, requires the right hemisphere, while the left brain handles arithmetic and formulas. The right brain is deeply involved in visual geometry, spatial estimation, and creative intuition required to solve complex abstract theorems. To create, to think, to analyze, and to feel, our brains require absolute unconditional teamwork across the central bridge. So, we have to ask ourselves a deeper question. If science completely debunked this, why does it keep trending? Why is it still alive on our feeds? Why do we see new filters every single day telling us to look left or right to see which side of our brain is dominant? The truth is, this myth thrives because of a massive psychological trap. First, it feeds into something psychologists call the Barnum Effect. This is exact the same psychological phenomenon that makes astrology or fortune telling work. The Barnum Effect occurs when individuals believe that generic, highly vague personality descriptions apply specifically and perfectly to them. When a video tells you you are a right-brained person, meaning you value deep connections, appreciate art, but sometimes get overwhelmed by your emotions, your brain instantly experiences a hit of validation. It says, "Oh my gosh, that's so me." You completely forgot that those traits describe literally every human being on the planet at some point of their lives. Second, the left versus right brain myth provides us with an incredibly comfortable pre-show narrative that simplifies the terrifying complexity of human nature. Human beings are messy. We are messy. That's how we are. We are walking contradictions. We can be deeply organized on Monday and completely chaotic on Friday. We can love structural, rigid data and still cry at a beautiful piece of music. That complexity is scary because it means we have to constantly figure out who we are. It's much easier to open an app, take a 10-question quiz, and get a neat little label that says, "I'm an analytical left-brainer." It gives us an illusion of self-knowledge without doing any of the actual heavy psychological work of self-reflection. And finally, it thrives because it is a massive commercial industry. Personality tests are worth billions of dollars. Algorithm loves categories because categories are easy to track, easy to monetize, and incredibly easy to target with specific advertisements. But here is where we have to look through our critical lens and see the dark side of this trend. Why does this matter so much? Why is it worth fighting, you ask me? When you accept a binary label like left-brained or right-brained, we are literally locking ourselves in an ideological prison. We are shutting off our minds to new horizons before we even give ourselves a chance to try. We use these labels as a protective shield to avoid the vulnerability and the hard work of learning something completely alien to us. But our brains have neuroplasticity, which means your brain is not a static, hardwired piece of stone. No, it is dynamic, flexible, and constantly evolving. Every single time we challenge ourselves to learn something outside our comfort zone, our brains literally rewrite themselves. It rewrites its physical architecture. It fires new signals, builds brand new synapses, and strengthens new neural pathways across the corpus callosum. We are a whole, complete person with an incredibly highly evolved capacity for both deep logic and creative expression. We don't have to choose between structure and emotion. We are one. Thank you so much for tuning into this 5th episode. It means the absolute world to have you along for this journey of reclaiming our minds together. Don't forget to check out my book updates at Blooming Shelf on TikTok and Instagram. And until next week, keep questioning, keep thinking, don't label yourself, and stay curious. Kisses. Bye, guys.